We're continuing with Ramayana, and we're in a sad stretch for the time being. The banishment of Ram has been pronounced. Ram said, no problem, but I have to go first tell my mothers, meaning Kaushalya and who's amongst our young people here? Who's the Kaikeyi, Kaushalya, and Sumitra. So he hasn't gone to Sumitra yet. He went to Kaushalya, and it was quite a scene between. He's going to do another outburst, but Lakshmana, an outburst of, I'll destroy everybody, give me the word. And Ram calms him down, and finally Kaushalya, recognizing Ram's gonna leave. He's not gonna, he's very determined. She tried to persuade him, but she gave her blessing. That's what he wanted. She gave it. Next, he's going to give the news to Sita. So we're going to cover 16 pages, 2 chapters. So I'm going to read a little bit fast, but you all know the story anyway. So just continue to pay attention, because there are some, the emotion, the loving exchange between the various associates of Lord Ramachandra, very special. So, Sita's plea. Ram moved along the royal highway towards Sita's quarters, praised by many Brahmins who lined the road. Sita had still not heard the news of Ram's impending exile and was eagerly awaiting him, her mind absorbed in thoughts of his installation. As her husband entered the room, she sprang from her seat. Ram had left Lakshman outside and had gone alone to speak with Sita. He was perplexed as he considered how to tell his wife the terrible news, although striving to control his mind. This is the human-like, portrayal, and contain his grief. Ram's face wore a pained expression, and his head hung low. Sita was astonished to see him in that state, his face pale and bathed in perspiration. Apprehensively, she inquired, "What troubles you, my lord? Today is the auspicious and joyful day of your installation, but you seem to be covered by the dark shadow of grief." Sita asked Ram why he was not accompanied by the royal servants, carrying the white umbrella. Why was he not wearing regal dress or anointed with sandalwood paste after having gone through the inaugural ceremony? Where was the king and his ministers? Or what was happening? The modern way of saying things. Ram steadied his mind and looked upon Sita's face. "My worshipable father has ordered me to enter the forest for 14 years' exile. O most beautiful princess, according to Kaikeyi's desire, my brother Bharata will be installed in my place. Indeed, in days gone by, 2 boons were granted to Kaikeyi by my ever-truthful father. She has recalled the king's debt now and placed him under his word to send me away, conferring the office of Prince Regent upon the noble Bharat. In obedience to morality, I shall therefore depart forthwith to the forest. I've come to see you on my way." What? She shook like a tree caught in a gale. How could this be true? She listened with astonishment as Ram continued, "O high-minded lady, please remain firm. In my absence, you should take to fasts and prayer, remaining disciplined at all times. Worship and serve my father and mother, who are both grieving deeply due to my separation from them. Sumitra and Kaikeyi should also be served by you, as should Bharat and Shatrughna, who are both as dear to me as my own self. Be especially careful not to praise me before Bharat, for men endowed with power and wealth cannot tolerate hearing others praised. Indeed, Bharat will be the king and should therefore be served by you with all attention, carefully avoiding any offense. Sita was dumbfounded. She turned pale and her eyes opened wide. She knew without doubt that Ram meant what he said. The princess listened in horror as he instructed her. Ram told her to remain living peacefully in Ayodhya under the protection of the and Bharat devoting emperor and Bharat devoting herself to righteousness and religion. Ram himself would leave immediately for the forest. After hearing Ram speak, the noble Sita became indignant out of her love for her husband. Her cheeks flushed red, and she replied angrily, "How have you uttered such words today, O Lord? They are neither worthy of one possessed of strength and weapons, who is capable of affording protection to the weak. Your advice is not worth hearing." Ooh. Considering Ram as her only refuge, Sita spoke strongly. She described how the father, mother, brother, and any other relation were never the shelter of a chaste woman with a husband. The wife should share her husband's fortune under all circumstances. She stood in front of Ram, her eyes flashing as she continued, "I am enjoined by ancient religious codes to enter the forest along with you, dearest Ram. I cannot possibly remain in Ayodhya. If you leave today for the forest, I shall walk before you, cleaning away the sharp grasses and thorns on the path." Sita assured Ram that he could take her anywhere with confidence. She would live happily under his protection and would prefer forest life with him in residence to the richest palace or even heaven itself without him. She had been trained in all the arts of service and was well prepared to accompany him. "I need no further advice, O Lord. Simply order me to depart. Remaining with you in fragrant woodlands, I shall be happy, as happy as I am now living in your palace." Sita felt pained that Ram had not considered taking her with him. Raised in a line of warrior kings, the princess was not easily disturbed by difficulty. Again and again, she exhorted her husband to take her to the forest. "Certainly, you are capable of guarding me from any danger. Indeed, none other can guard me as you can, Ram, nor is it their sacred duty. I shall therefore go with you today. That is my fixed determination." He has some tough things to deal with. What Kaushalya said was really heavy. And what Lakshman said was really heavy. And so they have their different relationship. And these are heavy people saying very direct, heavy things. Ooh. Sita was fond of the country. She imagined herself alone with Ram amid beautiful mountains, woods, and lakes. Even if it was austere, she would nevertheless prefer thousands of years spent with her husband in this way than a single day without him. She spoke her deepest feelings. "I shall enter the forest at your feet. I'm exclusively devoted to you. My mind is ever attached to you, and I'm determined to die if disunited from you. Therefore, grant my prayer and take me with you today." Ram considered the difficulty of living in the forest, and he did not feel at all inclined to take Sita with him. He spoke gently to his dear wife, who had buried her face in her hands and was sobbing. "My dear lady, you are born of noble line and are always devoted to virtue. Practice that virtue and appease my mind. for I cannot bear to see you suffer. I shall now give you advice meant only for your good, frail Sita. Not only is there no joy in the fearful forest, but it is always fraught with misery. Simply by taking you there, I would be neglecting my duty to protect you. Ram described the forest where he had gone many times for hunting expeditions. There were numerous lions and other fierce beasts, marshes and rivers abounded in crocodiles and other fierce aquatics. The forest paths were rugged and often impassable. Innumerable thorny trees and stinging bushes made traveling difficult. Sharp grasses grew everywhere. Hornets, gnats, scorpions, spiders, and mosquitoes were always present, along with snakes and serpents of every kind. In the deep forest, the darkness was dense. Furious winds often blew, lashing a traveler's face with debris. Ram was determined to dissuade his gentle wife Sita from following him. Exhausted after searching all day for food, one must lie down at night upon beds of dry leaves. Baths must be taken in lonely lakes, which are the abode of serpents. By day and night, the terrible pangs of hunger can be appeased only by one's mind, for food is scarce. O princess, one is subjected to all kinds of illnesses and mental anguish. Anger, greed, and fear must be completely controlled. The forest is certainly a place of terrible suffering. Therefore, give up this idea of following me there. It is not a secure place for one such as you. Sita's determination remained unshaken. All these dangers will be as nothing to me if I'm able to remain by your side. I will be I will in any event have no fear whatsoever with you as my protector. Even Indra will not be able to harm me when you are with me. What then of mere beasts? You have always instructed me that a wife can never be independent from her husband, O Ram. Indeed, she is half of his very self. How then can I not accompany you? Sita remembered how, when she was a young girl, an astrologer had predicted that she would one day have to live in the forest. Surely that time had arrived, she continued to plead with Ram. Was this not an opportunity for her to fulfill her religious duty by following him to the forest? Would not any other course be would not any other course be against virtue? The husband was the wife's supreme deity, Sita quoted the scriptures. A chaste woman who remained throughout life by her husband's side surely attained the destination as him after death. That was her only desire, to be with Ram always. Looking into Ram's eyes, she spoke in a piteous voice. For what reason then, O great hero, would you leave me behind? I, who am devoted and faithful, who shares alike your every pleasure and pain, and who desires to follow the religious path, you should certainly bring me with you. Otherwise, being sorely afflicted, I shall resort to poison, fire, or water in order to bring about my end. Koshalya threatened the same thing. Although Sita's lamentation hurt him, Ram did not relent. He tried to pacify and reassure her, but she would only become all the more determined to accompany him. Agitated at the thought of separation from her husband, she taunted him. Has my father Janaka obtained as my protector a woman in the form of a man? Woo. How, in your absence, could I tolerate the people falsely saying, oh, it seems that strength and valor are lacking in Ram, as he could not protect his own dear wife? What fear has assailed you that you now desire to desert me, although I remain entirely devoted to you? I will not cast my eyes on another man, even in thought. How then can you consider delivering me for protection to another, oh, my lord? Sita continued to beseech Ram. She had no intention of remaining behind without him under any circumstances, be it in heaven or hell. She could only be happy by her husband's side. Sita gazed imploringly at Ram as she begged him to take her with him. Ram was agonized by the thought of leaving behind his beloved wife. He would miss her. Still, he feared her suffering in the forest. His heart ached as she cried out to him, "Without you, heaven would be exactly as hell to me, while with you, hell would be the best of the abodes. How can I remain here under the control of those who are inimical to you and have sent you to the forest? If I must watch you leave without me, then I shall drink poison this very day. I cannot bear the pain of separation from you even for an hour. How then shall I stand it for 14 years? Take me with you, or let me give up my life here and now in your presence." Sita's beautiful face was streaked with tears, which fell continuously from her dark eyes like drops of water from blue lotus flowers. Ram embraced her and gently wiped away her tears. He was still apprehensive about taking her, but he could not see her endure the pain of his separation. She was already almost senseless from grief, and he had not even left. What would happen to her during 14 years of his absence? Making up his mind to take her with him, he spoke to her reassuringly. "You won." They didn't say that. "I would find no pleasure even in heaven if I obtained it at the cost of your suffering, O most pious lady. Not knowing your real feelings and being afraid that forest life would cause you pain, I discouraged you from following me. I see now that destiny has decreed you should dwell with me in the forest. Follow me then, O princess, and I shall protect you in strict accord with the moral laws always followed by the virtuous." Ram made clear his firm intention to go to the deep forest and remain there for the full duration. He wanted Sita to have no doubt of what lay ahead. He was fixed in his determination to obey his parents' command. How could one who disregarded elders and teachers ever hope to please God, who is not so easily seen or obtained? Earth, heaven, and the kingdom of God can all be achieved by one who serves his mother, father, and teachers. Explaining all this to his devoted wife, Ram said, "Not even truthfulness, charity, or sacrifice are comparable to serving one's father and mother. This is the eternal religion." Pious men devoted to serving their parents teach that religions of the gods teach the regions reach the regions of the gods and beyond. I therefore desire to do exactly what my truthful father has enjoined. I shall go to the forest today. As I see that you are set on following me, my resolve to leave you behind has weakened. Oh, lady of bewitching eyes, I shall take you with me, and together we will practice asceticism in the deep forest. I am pleased with you, Sita. Your determination to serve me in every circumstance is worthy of your dynasty, and it adds glory to mine. Prepare to leave immediately, give away all your riches to the Brahmins, and go with only a simple dress and no belongings. We shall soon depart. Yay! Sita was overjoyed to hear her husband's agreement. Her face blossomed like a full-blown lotus. Excitedly, she began following Ram's instructions, giving away all her costly garments and jewels, as well as all other riches in her palace. Now, Lakshman. In the meantime, Lakshman, who had been waiting patiently outside Sita's apartment, saw Ram coming out. He bowed down before Ram and held his feet tightly. "If your mind is set upon leaving for the forest, then take me with you," he implored. "I shall walk ahead of you holding my bow and guarding against all dangers. With joy, I shall accompany you through beautiful woods, resounding with the cries of wild animals. Without you, I do not desire even the rulership of all the worlds." Now, this statement by Lakshman is later, much later, in Pachavati, Ram chides him for this statement. It's a false ego statement. That's what what comes much later. I will. Da, 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 da. You familiar with that? So the passage is at the advice of Agastya, they go to Panchavati and they see the place, and Ram says to Lakshman, please build a cottage that suits your need, my needs, and Sita's needs. And although it's indirect, according to the commentators, he understands he's being scolded. He said, I'm your servant, and I'll create a cottage exactly according to your direction. But don't include me in the picture of what my needs are and Sita's needs are and your needs are. Just tell me what you want. And so the commentary says although he didn't correct him at this moment, later he's correcting him. It's the commentators. The mood of service is according to the instruction of the master. And he's saying, I'll read it again. I shall walk ahead of you, holding my bow and guarding against all dangers. With joy I shall accompany you through the, etc., etc. Speaking through false ego, in other words. Anyway, it wasn't his mood, but that's the language indicates. Lakshman hoped that Ram would approve, but Ram tried to dissuade him. My dearest Lakshmana, you are dearer to me than life itself, always affectionate, devoted to virtue, and firm in your on the right path. You are my constant and most valued companion. Yet, if you follow me to the forest, who will be left to serve your mother Sumitra and the illustrious Kaushalya? Ram suggested that Kaikeyi would not be kind to her co-wives once she obtained the kingdom. Bharat would be devoted to his own mother, Kaikeyi, and thus the other queens would be neglected. His own mother, Kaikeyi, and thus the other mothers would be neglected. Therefore, Lakshmana should remain in Ayodhya to care for Kaushalya and Sumitra. By serving Ram's elders, Lakshmana would demonstrate his devotion to Ram. Ram concluded, incomparably great religious merit will be earned by you, O noble Lakshman, and our mothers will be saved from suffering. Lakshman was not inclined to accept Ram's advice. How could he live without Ram? In soft but firm words, he argued that Bharata and Shatrughna were both devoted to Ram. They would therefore serve all of Ram's elders equally. Lakshmana promised his brother, if somehow they become proud and arrogant upon obtaining the kingdom, abandoning virtue and neglecting their elders, I will return and punish them. For even while we live in the forest, news of the kingdom will reach us through the sages and ascetics living there. Lakshman had already anticipated Ram's objections and had carefully considered them. There was no doubt in his mind that he should follow his brother. Continuing to reassure Ram, Lakshman reminded him how the king had already arranged more than adequate support for Kaushalya and her dependents. The revenue of thousands of villages was under her control. She was capable of maintaining herself as well as Sumitra and even Lakshmana himself. He concluded, therefore, kindly make me your personal attendant, for there will be no unrighteousness in this act. Going before you with my sword, I shall clear a safe path for you and Sita. In wakefulness or sleep, you shall find me by your side and ready to do your every bidding. Ram was pleased and comforted to hear Lakshmana speak. Lakshmana was as dear to him as his life itself, and Ram had been sad at the prospect of leaving him. Holding Lakshmana by the shoulders and looking into his expectant face, Ram said, take leave of your near and dear ones, O my brother, for we shall depart shortly. Lakshmana felt a surge of happiness, and his limbs trembled. He bowed to his elder brother and asked for his order. Ram asked Lakshmana to go to Vashishta's hermitage, where he had left some divine weapons. There were 2 celestial bows, along with a pair of inexhaustible quivers, 2 impenetrable pieces of body armor, and a pair of long, shining swords. Ram had received these as a dowry from Janaka and had left them with Vashishta so they could receive daily worship in his hermitage. He said to Lakshman, "Bring all those weapons, dear brother, for I feel we will need them soon." And the chapter is almost over. Lakshmana joyfully went and fetched the weapons. Then he and Ram together began to distribute their wealth to the Brahmanas. Many sages came at that time to offer their blessings to Ram, and all of them were given great riches: gold, silver, jewels, pearls, chariots, horses, silken garments, and hundreds of thousands of cows were distributed freely to anyone who came begging charity. Many thousands of Brahmins were given sufficient alms to maintain them for the rest of their lives. Ram's relations and dependents, as well as the needy and afflicted, were also given much wealth. At that time in Ayodhya, there was not a single Brahmin or needy person who was not provided with gifts. Being thus honored and gratified by Ram, they all returned to their homes, praising him in their hearts. End of chapter. And now we have 10 more pages. We're all ready for it, right? Sad farewells. Get your Kleenex tissues and handkerchiefs ready, because it was time for Ram and his 2 companions to say their farewells, holding their weapons. And followed by Sita, the brothers made their way towards Dasarath's palace. As they passed along the road, many men crowded around to watch them, plunged in sorrow at seeing their beloved prince leaving. They lamented in various ways. Here passes the same Ram who before would move regally in state, followed by a huge retinue. Now he walks with only Sita and Lakshman as his companions. Although used to every luxury, he is going to the terrible forest in obedience to his father's word. Some citizens censured the king, whom they felt had been gripped by some evil spirit. How could he send his dearest son into exile? Ram's qualities were evident to all: his compassion, learning, gentleness, sense control, and mental peace. All were ever visible in that noble prince. The citizens could not face the prospect of Ram's departure. They felt pain, just as a tree with all its fruits and flowers is hurt when the root is damaged, and they spoke out in public places. "We will give up our homes and villages and go with the pious Ram to the forest. Let us share with him all his joys and sorrows. Let Kaikeyi rule over a deserted kingdom, bereft of its people." Everyone feared the prospect of Kaikeyi becoming powerful as the mother of the king. They angrily cursed her again and again. All of them would go with Ram. They would abandon the city, leaving its houses filled with dust and overrun with mice. The forest would become a city, and Ayodhya a forest. They would drive out from the forest all the fierce animals and snakes, sending them to live in Ayodhya with Kaikeyi as their protector. The 2 brothers heard the laments of the people, but they kept their minds under strict control. Smiling gently and glancing with affection at the citizens, they walked together like a pair of powerful lions. They entered Dasarath's palace and saw Sumantra, who stood with folded hands and a disconsolate face. Ram asked him to announce their arrival to the king. When Sumantra went before Dasarath, he found the king distracted by grief, heaving deep sighs, his eyes red from weeping. The devoted and faithful Sumantra regarded his master to be like the eclipsed sun or a fire covered by ashes. Bowing at the king's feet, Sumantra said, the illustrious Ram has distributed all his wealth to his dependents and the Brahmanas, and now stands at your door awaiting your permission to depart for the forest. Ordering his minister to show Ram in, the king also asked that all his wives be present. Sumantra brought the queens, who arrived accompanied by numerous maidservants. He then brought Ram and Lakshman before their father. As Ram entered the room, Dasrath ran impulsively towards him, but being stricken with sorrow, he fell senseless to the floor. Ram and Lakshman rushed to assist their unconscious father. All the ladies threw up their arms and gave out a wail which mixed with the tinkling of their ornaments. A commotion filled the room with cries of, "Alas, alas, O Ram." Kaikeyi alone remained unmoved. Ram and Lakshman, both crying, lifted their father and placed him gently on the couch. As the king returned to consciousness, Ram regained his composure and, with folded hands, said, "I have come to take leave of you, father. Please grant me your permission to go to the forest. Also allow Lakshman and Sita, whom I could not deter, even with great effort, to accompany me. O great king, please give up your grief and look favorably upon us, for we wish to depart now." Ram calmly awaited his father's permission. The king spoke with difficulty. "As a result of a promise I made to Kaikeyi, I have lost my good sense. Therefore, my dear Ram, take me captive and rule over his kingdom, this kingdom." Fixed in righteousness, Ram replied, "May you rule the earth for another 1,000 years. I have no desire for sovereignty. After a mere 14 years I have passed, I shall return and once more take hold of your feet, having redeemed your pledge, O ruler of men." Dasrath was mortified, but he saw Kaikeyi urging him on with covert gestures. Bound by the fetters of truth, he spoke to his son, granting him permission to leave. "Please leave with an undisturbed mind, O Ram, and may your journey be safe and a happy one." The king was devastated. He could see that Ram's decision to depart was firm and not to be reversed. Ram was devoted to piety and truth. Dasrath requested him to remain just one night so that he and Kaushalya might see him a little longer. He wanted to offer Ram all enjoyable things on that last day. Trembling with grief, the king said, "I swear to you that I never wanted this to happen. I have been obliged by Kaikeyi, who has abandoned virtue after long concealing her evil intentions. Your willingness to accept this terrible order simply to save me from sin proves beyond doubt your greatness. Oh, gentle Ram, I permit you to leave. Only go tomorrow with my blessings." Hearing his father's request, Ram became concerned. He did not wish to delay his departure any longer and said, "Who will offer me tomorrow the delights I enjoy today? The time for my departure has come, and I must now cast aside all thoughts of enjoyment. Let me leave right away. Make over this vast kingdom with all its riches to Bharata. My resolution to live in the forest cannot be swayed. Your boons to Kaikeyi should now be implemented in full. I shall live with ascetic for 14 years, and the world should be given to Bharata." Ram moved closer to his anguished father, who sat shaking his head. He asked the king to be firm and free from sorrow. Ram assured his father that he had no desire at all for the kingdom, nor for any pleasures, nor even for life itself devoid of virtue. He only wished to execute the king's command and prove him true to his word. Comforting the grieving monarch, Ram said, "Since Kaikeyi said to me, 'Go to the forest, O Raghava,' and I replied by saying, 'I am going,' I must now redeem that pledge. Please let me leave. I cannot wait an instant longer." Ram felt sorrow to see his father suffering such intense agony. Not wanting to increase his father's pain, however, Ram kept his own feelings in check and maintained a calm expression. He spoke gently, assuring his father that he would certainly enjoy his stay in the forest. He would sport happily with Sita in many delightful woods and groves, protected by his own weapons and by Lakshmana. There would be no fear for them from the beasts and Rakshasas in the forest. When 14 years had passed, the king would find them returned unharmed and ready to serve him again. Bharata alone could completely and righteously rule the globe in his absence. Ram added, I shall never accept the kingdom by bringing infamy to you, O king. Indeed, I could renounce even pleasure, including my own dear wife, in order to satisfy your command. I shall only be happy the moment I enter the forest. You need not feel any pain from me. Be peaceful, my lord, and allow me to leave. Dasarath, tormented by a burning agony, embraced Ram tightly and then again fell unconscious, showing no signs of life. All the queens, along with their maidservants, cried loudly. Kaikeyi felt her purpose fulfilled and was rejoicing inwardly. Witnessing her silence, the king's intimate friend Samantra was furious. Beating his head, wringing his hands, and grinding his teeth, he spoke scathingly at her, his eyes blazing with wrath. Here it comes. Here lies your husband, the support of the whole world, betrayed and forsaken by you, O queen. Surely there is nothing sacred for you. I consider you to be the murderess of your husband and the destroyer of your entire race. Do not despise your lord in this way, for his order is superior to that of even 1,000,000 sons. Ignoring the time-honored rule of primogeniture, you seek to usurp Ram's rights and bring unbearable pain to the king. Tears flowed from the minister's eyes as he spoke. He told Kaikeyi to renounce her evil aim. If her son became the king, then no pious man would remain in the kingdom. What joy should she derive from ruling the empty earth, which was earned through sin? It was a great wonder that the earth did not split apart and swallow her, or that the great sages did not utter fiery curses to consume her on that very spot. Having served the king all his life, Samantra felt every pain the king felt as if it was his own, and he addressed Kaikeyi. He could hardly bring himself to look at her. The glorious king will never belie his promise to you. Do not force him to perform an act repugnant to himself and the whole world. Follow the desire of the king and become the protectress of the world. Let Ram be installed on the throne. He will undoubtedly always remain favorable to you in every way. If, however, on your order he is sent to the forest, then your only gain will be unending infamy. Give up your misguided desire, O Kaikeyi, and live happily. Kaikeyi looked coolly at Sumantra, who stood before her with joined palms, and she made no reply. Her mind remained unmoved as she awaited the execution of her order. Seeing her resolve, Dasarath, who had regained consciousness, sighed and said to Sumantra, you should immediately order my army to make ready to depart. They should accompany Ram to the forest. So too should wealthy merchants skilled at establishing networks of shops search out hunters who know the secrets of the forest and send them with Ram. Assemble thousands of capable servants and have them prepared to leave. Indeed, you should arrange for my entire treasury and my granary to be transported along with Ram. He should not have to endure any austerity during the 14 years of exile. Whew. Kaikeyi doesn't like that. As Dasarath spoke, Kaikeyi became alarmed. The king was going to divest the kingdom of all its wealth before her son was crowned? Dismayed and fearful, she turned toward Dasarath and spoke, her mouth parched and her voice choked. How can you bestow upon Bharat a kingdom stripped of its wealth? How then will he actually be the ruler of the world as you have promised? The king turned angrily toward Kaikeyi. After handing me a heavy burden to bear, you are now lashing at me as I carry it, O hostile and vulgar woman. When asking for your boons, you should have stipulated that Ram could not take anything with him to the forest. Abandoning all sense of righteousness, you have taken to the path leading only to grief. I cannot stay here with you any longer. Along with the people of Ayodhya, I shall follow Ram to the forest. Ram approached his father and said politely, O dear king, of what use to me is an army and all your riches? I have renounced the kingdom. How then can I take its wealth? He who has parted with an elephant, yet seeks to regain its tether, is simply a fool. I am resolved to enter the forest and dwell there with the ascetics, wearing the bark of trees and living on whatever produce I can glean from day to day. Ram wanted to act only in accord with the scriptural instructions regarding the vow of forest life. He told his father that one living in the forest should not do so in great opulence. Ram asked that the king not bestow upon his brother a kingdom bereft of its riches. He would leave only his weapons and a spade for digging roots. Leave with his weapons and a spade for digging roots. Turning to the king's servants, Ram said, Bring me the tree barks, and I shall take off these royal garments and make ready to depart. His request so gladdened Kaikeyi that she personally fetched the Spartan forest clothes made from barks and grasses she had already prepared. Shamelessly handing them to Ram, Lakshman, and Sita, she said, Put these on. Ram and Lakshman quickly and adroitly changed into those clothes, but the beautiful Sita was perplexed, unsure how to wear them. Trying again and again to place the bark linen over her other clothes, Sita felt abashed. With her eyes flooded with tears, she said to her husband, How does one wear such dress, my lord? Ram personally fastened the bark over Sita's silk dress. Seeing her clad in forest apparel, her many female servants began to wail piteously. This noble princess has not been ordered to enter the forest. They cried, Dear Ram, please let her remain here with us so we may continue to serve her and enjoy the blessings of seeing her divine form. How can this gentle lady live like an ascetic in the forest? She does not deserve to suffer in this way. Lots of different voices here. How do you please people? Although hearing their beloved remonstrations, Ram continued to tie on Sita's forest clothes as she desired. Suddenly, Vashishta became overwhelmed with distress at seeing the gentle Sita about to enter the forest. Feeling angered and weeping hot tears, he said to Kaikeyi, Oh, cruel woman, have you no shame? After deceiving the king and bringing disgrace to your family, are you still not satisfied? Will you stand by and watch as this high-born lady leaves for the forest wearing the coarse garments you prepared? You did not ask that she be exiled along with Ram. These tree barks are not meant for her. Excellent garments and jewelry should be brought by you for your daughter-in-law. She should proceed to the forest on first-class conveyances and accompanied by all her servants. Vashishta loved Ram and Sita like his own children. He could not stand and watch as they departed, while the hard-hearted Kaikeyi looked on gleefully. The sage spoke words which pierced Kaikeyi deeply. He explained that according to scripture, the wife was her husband's own self. They were one and the same person. As such, Sita should therefore rule over the kingdom. Even if Ram himself could not, the forest would become the capital of the world. Indeed, the entire state of Koshala, along with all its people, and the city of Ayodhya would leave along with Ram. The sage blazed with anger as he went on, appearing like a smokeless fire. Surely Bharat and his brother Shatrughna will also enter the forest clad in barks. You may then rule over the desolate kingdom, peopled only by trees. which alone could not rise up and follow Ram. Vashishtas, powerful. Kaikeyi remained silent and looked at Ram and Sita, who were ready to leave. Sita wished only to follow her husband. Even upon hearing Vashishta's words, she was not swayed in the least from her purpose. She stood next to Ram, covered from head to toe in grass and bark cloths given by Kaikeyi. All the people present then loudly exclaimed, "Shame upon the powerless king who does nothing to stop this flagrant injustice." Hearing their cries, the emperor became dispirited and lost interest in life. He turned to Kaikeyi and rebuked her for making Sita wear forest garments, but the queen remained silent. Ram then came before his father, who sat with his head bent low, and asked his permission to leave. He requested the king to take special care of Kaushalya, whom he feared would suffer in his absence. Looking at his son, clad in the dress of a hermit, the king fell unconscious. After being brought to his senses by his ministers, who gently sprinkled him with cool water, Dasarath lamented loudly. "I think in my past life I must have given terrible pain to other living beings, and thus this pain is now being felt by me. Surely life will not leave one until the appointed time arrives. Otherwise, why does death not claim me now, who am tormented by Kaikeyi and beholding my dearest son wearing the robes of an ascetic, crying out, 'Oh, Ram!'" The king broke off, choked with tears. With great effort, Dasrath then managed to control his grief, and turning towards Samantri, said, "Fetch here the best of my chariots and take the glorious Ram beyond this city. When I since I see a virtuous and valiant son here, exiled in the forest by his own father and mother, I can only conclude that this is the results of piety, as declared by the scriptures. Religion is undoubtedly difficult to divine." As Ram and Sita approached the chariot brought by Sumantra, Kaushalya came and tightly embraced Sita, saying, "Wicked are those women who forsake their worthy husbands when fallen upon hard times. Even though such women have in the past been protected and afforded every happiness, they malign and even desert their husbands when misfortune arrives. Such women are heartless, untruthful, lusty, and sinful by nature, being quickly estranged in times of trouble. Neither kindness, nor education, nor gift, nor even marriage ties can capture the hearts of those women." Kaushalya loved Sita as a daughter. She knew that Ram's gentle wife was entirely devoted to piety, and she spoke to her only out of motherly affection. She continued, "For virtuous women who are truthful, pious, obedient to their elders, and acting within the bounds of morality, the husband is the most sacred object and is never abandoned. Although Ram is being sent to the forest, you should never neglect him, dear Sita. Whether wealthy or without any means whatsoever, he is always your worshipable deity." Sita was filled with joy to hear this advice, which was in accord with her life's aim. Joining her palm, she replied reverentially, "I shall surely do all that your honorable self instructs. I have always heard from you proper advice about how to serve my husband. Even in thought, you should not compare me to wicked women, for I am unable to deviate from virtue, even as moonlight cannot be parted from the moon, as a lute is useless without its strings, or a chariot without its wheels, so a wife is destitute when separated from her worthy husband. Having learned from my elders all the duties incumbent upon a wife, and knowing the husband to be a veritable deity, how can I ever neglect Ram, O venerable lady?" Kaushalya's heart was touched by Sita's reply, and she shed tears born of both delight and agony, being moved by Sita's piety and at the same time anguished at the thought of her imminent departure. So all these emotions, huh? So we have 4 pages left. Ram looked with affection at his mother. It was time for him to leave. He feared Kaushalya would pine away after he left. Ram stood before her with folded palms. Please do not show my father sad expressions, heightening his grief. 14 years will pass quickly even while you sleep. You will rise one morning to find me returned with Sita and Lakshman, surrounded by friends and relatives. Ram looked around at the royal ladies standing there and said, please forgive any unkind words or acts which I may have said or done out of ignorance, because we have lived closely together. Now I take leave of you all. A cry rose up from the ladies that resembled the cry of female cranes. Dasarath's palace, which had always been marked with joyous sounds of music and festivities, was now filled with sounds of agonizing wails. Catching hold of Dasarath's feet, Ram, Sita, and Lakshman took their final leave of him and walked around him in respect. Numbed by grief, Ram bowed to Kaushalya and climbed up onto the chariot, followed by Sita. As Lakshman followed them, his own mother, Sumitra, came up to say goodbye. Embracing her son, she said, serve well your elder brother Ram, my dear son. The eternal moral law states that the older brother is the refuge of the younger, whether in good times or bad. Never forget the duties of our race, O Lakshmana, which are to practice charity, perform sacrifice for the good of the people, and to lay down one's life on the field of battle. Blinded by tears, Sumitra allowed her son to mount the chariot as she called out, farewell, dear son, farewell. Always see Ram as your dear father, Dasarath. Look upon Sita as myself, your mother, and see the forest as Ayodhya. Very nice. Sumantra took the reins of the horses and urged them forward. The great golden chariot moved ahead with a thunderous rumbling as it passed down the royal highway. The people assembled there were stunned with sorrow. Both old and young alike rushed towards the chariot as thirsty men would rush towards water in the desert. Clinging to the sides and the back of the chariot, they looked upon Sumantra, calling out, hold fast the reins, O charioteer, and drive slowly. We wish to see Ram a little longer. Ram, anxious to be gone as quickly as possible, asked them to desist and told Sumantra to drive more swiftly. Ordered by Ram, move on. And at the same time told by the people who filled the road, stop. Sumantra could do neither. With great difficulty, the chariot pressed slowly forward. Seeing Ram leaving and his city plunged into despair, the king fell prostrate. Upon being brought back to consciousness, he got up and, along with Kaushalya, ran after the chariot. Ram looked behind him and saw them trying to make their way through the crowd. He was unable to bear the sight of his father and mother in distress, but being bound by duty, he urged Sumantra ever forward. The charioteer was perplexed, hearing from behind the king calling out, come back, and then being ordered by Ram to drive more quickly. Ram said to him, this pain should not be prolonged further. Make haste. If my father reprimands you when you return, you should simply say you could not hear him. Now, whether that's in Valmiki Ramayana or not, I don't know, because it's significant. Ram sanctioning a fib. I don't think it's in Valmiki Ramayana. Finally breaking free from the crowd, the chariot gathered speed and left the city. Dasarath was still running along the road, his eyes fixed on the dust raised by the chariot's wheels, breathless, and at last losing sight of the chariot in the distance, Dashrath fell down on the road. As he lay there, Kausalya and Kaikeyi came to raise him up. On seeing Kaikeyi, however, the king became inflamed with anger. "Do not touch me, O sinful woman," he roared. "I never want to see you again. You are neither my wife nor relation, and I have nothing more to say to you. I also reject those who serve and depend upon you. If your son is in any way pleased to receive the sovereignty, then I shall shun him as well." Dasrath gazed at the tracks of the chariot. He covered his face in shame, blaming himself for Ram's departure. With Kaushalya's help, he slowly made his way back to the palace. As he passed along the road, he saw the city marked by mourning, more, people, sad people, mourning people. Its shops closed, its streets deserted, lamenting all the while. Dasrath entered his palace as the sun goes behind a cloud. That great palace was silent and without movement, overladen with a heavy atmosphere of sorrow. Dasrath went into Kausalya's apartments and, laying down upon a soft couch, cried out, "O Ram, have you really deserted me? Alas, only those who will endure these coming 14 years will be happy, seeing again the face of my gentle son. I cannot tolerate life without that tiger among men. O wicked Kaikeyi, you may rule this kingdom as a widow." Kaushalya looked sadly upon her husband and said, "Having discharged her poison upon Ram, the crooked Kaikeyi will now wander freely like a female serpent who has shed her skin. With Ram exiled and her own son installed as king, surely she will cause further fear to me, even like a snake living in one's own house. How shall I survive without Ram?" Thinking of Ram and Sita entering the forest, Kaushalya cried in pain. How would they survive? Exactly at a time when they should have enjoyed the luxuries of life, they were banished and made to live like ascetics. When again would she see them? Surely in some past life she had committed some grievous sin. For that reason she now suffered such terrible pain. She lamented loudly, "O Ram, O Lakshman, O Sita, where are you now? The fire of my grief tortures me today as the blazing sun scorches the earth in summer." Sumitra gently reassured Kaushalya, reminding her of the greatness of Ram and Lakshman. Controlling her own grief and sitting next to Kaushalya, she placed her arms around her co-wife. She spoke about Ram, describing his qualities and immeasurable strength, simply to prove his noble father to be perfectly truthful. He had renounced the throne and gone to the forest. This was the path of virtue, followed always by cultured men. That path led only to the region of never-ending happiness. Kaushalya should therefore never pity her son. Sumitra spoke softly. Being ever attended by the loving Lakshmana and followed by his devoted wife, Ram will feel no discomfort. Almost over. Even the sun will withhold its scorching rays from Ram's body, seeing his boundless virtues. Oh, a gentle and soothing breeze will always blow softly on Ram. At night, when he lies down to sleep, the cooling rays of the moon will caress him like a loving father. Sumitra stroked Kaushalya's face. She spoke to assuage her own suffering as much as that of Kaushalya. She told Kaushalya not to worry. Ram would surely be protected by the terrible weapons that Vishwamitra gave him. He would dwell fearlessly in the forest just as he would in his own palace. Sumitra concluded, knowing the power of that prince, I have no doubt we will see him returned as soon as his term of exile is concluded. With Ram as your son, you should not grieve in the least, for your good fortune is very great indeed. Shed your sorrow now, O sinless lady, for all the people must be comforted by you at this time, pained as they are by Ram's separation. Last paragraph. Comforted by Sumitra, Kaushalya felt relief and embraced her co-wife tightly. The two queens sat together for a long time, lost in thoughts of Ram. Nearby, the king lay almost unconscious on a couch, repeatedly murmuring Ram's name. To be continued. We can't say the end. But it's the end of the section, at least how he's organized things. So this was called betrayed, and then the next part is exiled. See what the other headings are. War, an epilogue. And the war ends with back to Ayodhya. And there's some very nice appendices. One of the Sunday lectures I'm planning to discuss while here in Houston is the descent of the Ganges, and make a comparison between what Srimad Bhagavatam says and what Ramayana says, Valmiki Ramayana specifically, and this. Because they're not the same. They're similar, but they're not the same. But we'll do that later. Pastime-wise, of course, in Krishna's Leela, we hear lots and lots and lots about his childhood pastimes. I mean, it's joyful, joyful, joyful in so many ways. Although there's demons that come, it's still joyful. But the departure from Vrindavan to Mathura has a similar ecstasy or bhava, mood, devotional mood. There are lots of parallels like that in Ram's Leela. There's differences, of course, also, but lots of similarities in events that take place. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's taking sannyas, leaving Navadvip. The sadness, etc., is meeting and separation. Naturally, it's there in both. In Vrindavan, although repeatedly Krishna purposely exhibits pastimes where his divinity is shown, the intensity of the love of the resident of Vrindavan is such that the Yogamaya potency covers their understanding of Krishna's divinity. Now, in this section that we read, the identity of Ram as Vishnu came only twice, at least in Valmiki Ramayana. One is very explicit, where Parshuram says, "You are Vishnu. You killed Madhu and Kaitava at the beginning of creation. You're the source of everything and the God of all gods." And Dasrath hears it. Vashishta hears it. And some of the sages also hear it. But it doesn't spread. So it's a little, that's Valmiki Ramayana. He hears he's Vishnu from Parshuram. But all of this is not thinking he's Vishnu, it's just his son. So the intimacy of parental affection is dramatically significant. Apparently, he also forgets what he heard from Parshuram. And there's one other somewhat indirect statement that's in effect similar. And that comes when Vishwamitra has requested Ram to come with him to the forest to deal with Marisha and Subahu. And Dasrath gets really worried. And he says, there's no need to worry. Now, he doesn't say specifically he's Vishnu, but he says, I know well his prowess, as do all the other sages here, so there's nothing to worry about. And commentary by acharyas speak on that verse specifically, elaborately, indicating his divinity. But otherwise, it's just his son. And all of the other, highly virtued behaviors, which makes it even more clear when Kaikeyi says what she says and acts the way that she's acting. It's so out of character for these people. These are, it's not a modern politician throwing mud at another politician or something. These are highly elevated personalities, cultured personalities. So it's so out of character. And I would like to find out, I'll like to find out from those that know Valmiki Ramayana very well, did Vashishta really speak like this? Because Vashishta is so powerful. Vashishta is so powerful. Vashishta is very powerful. So he could have just, blown her up or something, turned her to ashes. He could, he's so powerful. So how did Vashishta respond when all this scene is taking place? I'll try to remember to ask those that will know the answer to that question and report it tomorrow. So let's see if there's some discussion. Ramayana, in anticipation of the appearance of Lord Ramachandra in 2 days, Ram Navami. Yes, do we have a portable microphone? Could you take that?
Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Thank you for nice, wonderful reading. You mentioned about Lord Ram giving the instruction to Lakshman to prepare the huts for Lord Ram's use, Lakshman's use, and Mother Sita's use. I didn't understand that part. Could you give little bit more context and elaborate on that?
Say that the part that you didn't understand again, because you spoke swiftly and I didn't catch it.
No, I think you mentioned some other comment that that comes later on where Lord Ram asked.
Okay.
Yeah.
After 12 and a half years in the forest out of 14, the final period of time is suggested by Agastya that they stay at Panchavati. So following his advice, they go to Panchavati. Ram likes it, and he turns to Lakshman and says, Lakshman, please build a cottage that's suited for your needs, my needs, and Sita's needs. And Lakshman takes it as a chastisement. I don't do anything other than your instruction. So please just tell me what you want, and that's what I'll do. And then Ram compliments him for getting it. No, the commentary by the acharyas is extensive in that little section, saying Ram is meticulous about virtue and etiquette, and he didn't chastise or correct Lakshman at that time, it wasn't the right time to do it. So he did it later. And the way that he did it was indirect, very gentle and indirect. Because Lakshman was refined, he understood. Long, long ago, so many years ago, I had this way of speaking. I will protect you. I will do this. I will do that. So now you're saying, you want me to build the cabin according to my likes, my needs? That's not the position of a servant. So you just tell me, you just instruct me. I'll do whatever it is. So that's the context.
Thank you very much, Guru Maharaj. Um, Lord Krishna has his pastimes, and Lord Chaitanya also has his pastimes. And before they left the planet Earth, they also left us with Bhagavad Gita and 8 verses by Lord Chaitanya as instructions. So Lord Ram has his pastimes, which are very noble, very, very high standard. Has he left us with any specific or explicit instructions, set of instructions?
Excellent question. I'm unaware other than Ramayana itself. But that's another question I can ask our learned Ramayana scholars. I'm unaware of anything that he explicitly.
The other question I have, when this struggle is going on between Lord Ram's following the instructions of his father, and then the other great personalities, his mother's, his other seniors, they are advising him to do something other than that. And so I was thinking, Lord Ram has definitely, his personality is such that he will obey his father. But at the same time, the subjects of Ayodhya are also would like to see him as king, and they love him, and as king to be, he has some responsibility towards them.
Yes.
So how does his sense of responsibility is more towards his father than the subjects of Ayodhya?
I would add, it's as I was reading, I was thinking he's being a little selective. Obedience to, because his mother gives a very strong argument, even more so than the father is the mother. I mean, from with scriptural this and that, and then his father says, "I'm requesting you stay one night," and the answer is no. But the word of his father is everything, and his father says, "Stay one more night," and it's no. So it's adding to your question, your contemplation. Part of the duty to the obligation to citizens is to set an example, and so that's a major part of doing what's best for the citizens is setting an example. And set an example depends upon lots of things, because it's, a lot of being built around the order of father, But then they could just go ask Vashishta. And what's Vashishta going to say? Because does that trump the king? The Brahmanas give guidance to the king. So it's a little selective, it seems to me. But it's establishing, not only it's establishing the gold standard for virtue or something like that. At the same time, there's a purpose. Like, why did Krishna leave Vrindavan? Was he not considering the consequence of his leaving Vrindavan? Was he being neglectful of all? Because when Uddhava comes back to visit from Mathura, Nanda Maharaj asks, does he remember us? Does he remember his mother and father? Does he ask about all of the devotees here? And I guess there's thousands and thousands of cowherd boys and everybody that he's their life and soul. Does he think about us? So, their heart is pained. And what about that? That, at least for Krishna's side, and we can draw a comparison, because I'm more familiar with from Krishna's side than from Ram's side, but Krishna came to annihilate the demons, and Ram came to annihilate the Rakshasas. And the Rakshasas are out there, and he has to do it. So he has to leave. So they're going to have to undergo separation from him. So then you add to that, the sorrow of being exiled, not just going off with armies and smashing them or something. But there's other things there's multiple things going on, and he is the Lord of everybody, yes. So he has affection for everybody as well as for his father and everybody else. But there's higher purposes being served in layers. The righteous, virtuous layer, the rasa layer, the purpose of the Lord's advent layer. He made promises to the demigods, and he has to fulfill his promise to the demigods, which he does. Madhav, could you send 2 text messages to me while I remember? One is to check with the what did Vashishta say about Ram's exile? Was there some conversation during this whole scene just before his departure? And then there was another question that came up that I was going to do some research on. I can't even remember what that one was. Aradhita, you remember what that one was? Huh? No, from before. From before. I was looking at you to ask you to send me a text message, but you were busy with your computer and stuff. What was the other one that I was going to research? Who remembers? What? Yes. Yes, okay, that was your question. Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, your son. You get to take your mask off while you ask your question. Yay. You ask 5 questions now.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I have 2 questions. One, I know Lakshman went with Lord Ram in exile for 14 years, but I don't know why Bharat and Shatrughan didn't go.
They wanted to. After Bharat and Shatrughan came back, because as you recall, he was out of town. When he came back and he found out what happened, he was shocked. And so he was going to bring Ram back. But Ram said, no, you're supposed to become the king. He's got to be a king, so you be the king. And for 14 years, you're the king. So Ram said, no, they wanted to go. I'll put on tree bark. I'm with you guys. You were brothers. We're hanging together. And Ram said, no. Father said, you become the king. And Shatrughna was always with Bharat. So it was needed for also Shatrughna and Bharat to give consolation to the queens, the mothers of both of them. Okay.
Okay. And my second question is, when Lakshman asked Lord Ram to go with them, I know that that Lord Ram allowed it to go, but in the beginning, why didn't Lord Ram allow Lakshman to go with them?
Well, they had I was thinking to comment on this. There's not a lot, there's very little described about the youthful activities of the four brothers. In contrast to Krishna book, where there's lots and lots and lots of descriptions of Krishna and Balaram together. But one of the things it said in their childhood pastimes is they were inseparable. Ram wouldn't eat a meal unless Lakshman was there to have his meal with him. Ram wouldn't go to bed at night unless Lakshman was by his side. I mean, they were inseparable, like a shadow and the object casting the shadow. They were inseparable. So, it was Lakshman's mood. So he was just honoring his mood. That's why he agreed. And he saw the practicality of it. You know, with his power and this and that, he could also help protect Sita. He wasn't needing, it was, you know, this Leela. Ram doesn't need anybody. But it made, you know, in terms of their relationship, it made sense. Anything else? Anything online? Nothing online.
I'm wondering, Guru Maharaj, is there any specific reason Kai chose 14 years rather than like 1 year, 5 year?
15, 16, 18.
Not more, but less.
Life. Someone else asked that question. It might have been last night. Was it last night? Last night. And I said, I don't know. Other than the logic that it will take some number of years for Kaikeyi's calculation or Mantra's calculation was it would take some number of years of Bharat to establish his following and the faithfulness to him and all of that, because everyone was like totally lined up with Ram. And that would make it difficult for Bharat if Ram was around. So he had to be away. And that period of time was considered a suitable period of time. Now, numerology or the connection with Mahabharata and 14 years and all that, I don't have the answer. Let's see, add that to the third. And I'll see if our Ramayana scholars can come up with answers. You have something?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I have got a question. Kekai, demigods wanted Ram to go to exile and to forest and to kill the Rakshas. So Kekai acted a role. Demigods requested Kekai, or Kekai acted according to mantra. So when mantra insisted Kekai.
No. This Ramayana, Krishna Dharma's Ramayana speaks of the demigods having some role in guiding her intelligence and Kaikeyi's intelligence this way. That's not what's in Valmiki Ramayana. The demigods didn't, when they requested Vishnu to appear, it wasn't, go into exile for 14 years once you get there. There was nothing like that. Nothing like that. Rather, according to the commentators of Valmiki Ramayana, Ram himself, being the super soul in the heart of every living being, inspired Kaikeyi to do what she did, say what she did, feel what she felt, etc., prompted by super soul. Because it's part of Ram's plan to do all these things. The demigods they had no role in it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, we got another question in the front row.
I have one more question.
Okay.
I know that Mantra changed Keki's mind about like exiling Ram, but how did Keki change her mind? Because Ram used to be very near and dear to Keki.
Yes.
So how and why did she change her mind about exiling Ram?
I don't understand the question. How did it work? Because I mean, if super soul is inside the heart of everyone, including Kaikeyi. So super soul can give knowledge or forgetfulness or anything. So guided by super soul, Kaikeyi did what Kaikeyi did, although her nature was just the opposite. Her nature was as affectionate. Many times, because Dasarath says this to her, many times you said you feel it very unusual that you have more affection for Ram than even for Bharat, who is your own son. You have such affection for Ram. How can you think these bad things about Ram? So it's totally switcheroo. It's a total 180 from she was affectionate to seeing as an enemy. Super soul. Now, the instrument for that was mantra. Mantra polluted her mind. She didn't go the right way. Mantra worked on her and worked on her and worked on her and worked on her and hey, mantra, you're right. Okay? Bad association. Watch out for bad association. That's the lesson.
Maharaj, I got another question in my mind.
Okay. Good.
Another question is, Mantra changed Keke's mind.
Mantra does what?
Mantra changed Keke's mind about putting Ram to exile.
It was her idea.
And she only cared about Bharat. But why didn't she care about the other three sons? Shatrughan, Bharat, and Ram.
She's envious. And everybody, Ram is the eldest son. And Ram is amongst the four brothers. He's loved by everyone most, loved by the queens most, loved by the citizens most, and she's envious. Now, why are people envious? Because, they want to be up there. They don't want somebody else to be up there. They want to be up there. And then she has this other kind of calculation. If Ram becomes king, my beloved queen, Kaikeyi, is going to be in the second position for sure. She'll be just neglected and pushed to the side, and that means I'll be pushed to the side. I won't have the privileges that I have. So it's envy. And she was blinded by that envy. She was seeing through those envy glasses. And so it was very spiteful, very wicked. Envy and pride are very dangerous. Okay. You have something more.
Yes, Maharaj, if time permits, I would like to. So when we read Ramayana and when we hear Ramayana, to me, two things are coming across, and I would like to know if there's more than that. The two things is just like Lord Ram is trying to increase the love of his devotees who are near and dear to him,
Yes.
he's similarly doing the same thing for us.
Yes.
So he's trying to increase our love for him
Yes.
by maintaining these amazingly high standard.
Well, you're saying amazingly high standards, and that's not wrong, but it's reality. It's he wants to lift the virtuous nature of those who love him. By loving him, we can work either way. By appreciating his standard of virtue and unflinching uh, determination to follow the path of virtue, we love him. And by loving him, it helps us want to go there too. It's lifting us
Yes.
in love and our capacity or propensity for virtue.
Yes. Yeah. And the other thing that's coming across is that this world is not a place of happiness.
Yeah, that's a lesson.
Yeah. Is there anything else besides these two that?
Well, sure, there's many.
Okay.
Many. I mean, one of the things that is less apparent, but is also a lesson, and that is when there's attachment for transcendence, there's also emotion. And the emotion may not look like lovely, but it's lovely, it's ecstatic. And that's, a less apparent lesson. And there's a lot of that. It's not just this particular section. There's a lot. There's a lot. I mean, so many considerations of, for example, when Sugriva sees that Vali is killed for all of what Sugriva had been through, stealing his wife and it's so many things. When Vali was killed, he felt really badly. That, because of him, his brother was killed. And Ram deals with it. Because of what he did, it's the degree of sinfulness it's best that he's. Anyway, there's so many things. Vali's saying, look, if you wanted help getting Sita back, just come to me. I already whooped Ravan. I could get Sita back like that. But then, that doesn't take care of his sin and the rectification of his sin. Just so I don't buddy up with somebody that's sinful to get what I want. I'm going to stand by virtue, and what you've done is sinful. You're to be punished as you've been punished. That's why I took that vow, to help your brother, because of your sin. So there's many, many, many things. Layers and layers. You have something? No? Okay. Your son has one more question.
Yes, I have one more question.
Okay.
Keki had 3 boons.
KK had 2 boons.
I think I got to my head. Yeah, so she had two boons, and she used them in a terrible way of exiling Ram and putting Bharat on the throne.
Yeah, those are the 2.
And she told the king to do it. That's right. But the king has a right. He doesn't need to do anything on anyone's order, so he could have not done it. But why did he do it?
Well, the two main things are, in addition to what he said so many years ago during that battle, 3 times in the name of Ram, I swear. Too late, it's done. And a second is, yes, he could have not done, but that's not the standard of righteousness. It's not the standard of the ancestry that he comes from. You give your word. When a king gives their word, they keep their word. Now he could ask the person who he gave his word to release me from that obligation. She wouldn't. He tried. But you give your word, you keep your word. So those are 2 reasons. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki.